Welcome to this video where we are discussing economic concepts of Game of Thrones. This is part of a series as House of the Dragon is dropping over the summer. Each week, a new episode, a new video will drop. Thrilled to have Dan Bragen here again as we are talking through issues. Today, it's the principal agent problem. Couple great videos to show you where we will see this problem defined and see the problem in action. So first, Dan, thank you again for being on the video.
Thank you for being here.
Good. Let's jump right into the first clip.
We allow the Northerners too much power. They consider themselves our equals.
How would you handle them?
I double their taxes and command them to supply 10,000 men to the Royal Army.
The Royal Army?
Why should every lord command his own men? It's primitive. No better than the hill tribes, we should have a standing army of men loyal to the crown, trained by experienced soldiers instead of a mob of peasants who've never held pikes in their lives.
And if the Northerners rebel?
I'd crush them. Seize Winterfell and install someone loyal to the realm as Warden of the North. Uncle Kevin, maybe.
And these 10,000 Northern troops, would they fight for you or their lord?
For me, I'm their king.
But you've just invaded their homeland, asked them to kill their brothers.
I'm not asking.
The North cannot be held. Not by an outsider, it's too big and too wild. And when the winter comes, the seven gods together couldn't save you and your royal army. A good king knows when to save his strength. And when to destroy his enemies.
So you agree? The Starks are enemies.
Great clip here that really does illustrate the principal agent problem. First, give a rough definition of the principal agent problem. It's a problem that occurs when you have somebody who is in charge of some entity, and that person's called the principal, and they are delegating duties to somebody else. Somebody else has duties the principal wants to have accomplished, once accomplished, delegating to somebody else, but there's not 100% supervision, and the person they're delegating to might have some slightly different priorities. So this other person's the agent, hence it's called the principal agent problem. The priorities for what the principal and the agent would like accomplished are not always perfectly aligned, and you can run into problems where the agent isn't carrying out the wishes of the principal. How's that illustrated, or why does this clip illustrate that so well, Dan?
Well, in this clip, we have Joffrey, who is a child, but at that time is the king, speaking to his mother, the queen mother, Cersei. And there's one thing that Cersei says I think is really indicative of the principal agent problem here, and I have it written to my left over here, so I'm going to look here real quick. But the North cannot be held, not by an outsider. It's too big and too wild. In the same way that the principal agent problem sort of arises by a problem of oversight, the North is quite literally an oversight problem. You cannot, it's too big, it is too wild. You can't send an army down there to watch over them, to make sure that they do your bidding. So when you can't do that, when it's really hard to do that, the North will act in their own interests. And typically these interests are contrary to what the throne wants. And I think this makes it such a great clip here to explain that.
No, it's great explanation of that. And so the North cannot be held, like it cannot be supervised. It cannot be held. The king has wishes. They'd like the North to go along with the wishes, but the North has their own priorities. So it's interesting when Cersei and Joffrey are discussing what is the best strategy for these agents to accomplish the goals that we want. And they don't say it in those exact words. And Joffrey thinks, oh yeah, we could just do this, right? I am king. They will follow. And Cersei seems to have a bit of a grasp that there is indeed a principal agent problem here. And I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's great that it's funny. It's great that we're doing this on the heels of the NFL draft, because yesterday Michael Penix Jr., I believe, was drafted by the Falcons.
Yep.
And if you look in the draft room after the pick was had, the owner comes in screaming at the general manager. It would seemingly be about that pick. So it seems like there may be a principal agent problem happening in the Falcons front office, where the GM is acting in his own interest for the team. and the owner isn't able to control him in some fashion, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great example so this is dropping in the summer, but this is being recorded on April 26th. It's the Friday after the draft. Dan's an Eagles fan. I'm actually wearing my Vikings tie after they had a couple first round picks yesterday. But fantastic example, right? The owner hired. Uh, now it's interesting in that because in many ways you would think the general manager's interest there, I would have thought the general manager's interests would have been more short term, perhaps, than the owner, unless the owner is perhaps so old that they're like, forget about the future, do everything to win right now.
Yeah.
It's in many ways, if they're coming in and yelling, it would have been the opposite way than I would have expected in that case.
Yeah, maybe the GM was just very interested in him as a prospect. I don't know.
Yeah. So pretty fascinating there. We'll certainly talk a little bit more, but let's go to clip number 2.
Echal, bin virnahan o que sendo trakoi. Ala jigesimai, ma vijazeri atinarmai. Bosman ha boskal. Hanna bobokak sendo trakoi. Hanna o gag ieri. Hanna kabak sanali erua, Leon. Rei ha paresere omai. Hasheri hrize vidok jovi have shivi gazgar. Hasheri antodre druvidos ge anima hoge gron shikiti mori. Imagine Mohari o Quenigin mori. Hasheri vajira hashi sandali. Vinajo Michal drogo asas koi me asati. Sira giviti hira sevason.
Great second clip. So Daenerys, like firing up the troops, right? Getting them all excited. How does this relate to? I wouldn't even mention it. Maybe the principal agent problem, but also overcoming the principal agent problem.
Well, in the clip, she's speaking to her soldiers who essentially, act as agents for her. They act on her behalf, or she hopes so. She wants them to, rather.
Yep.
And she's the principal. She wants to be queen, so she wants to rule and operate and tell people what to do. And in this clip, she's like, "I want you all to be my blood riders. I want you all to be the people that protect me, have my back, and be my loyal soldiers." And while she's saying this, she flies in on a massive dragon, a dragon who could kill all of them in that instant very quickly. And it relates to overcoming the principal agent problem, right? If she just said, "I want you to be my loyal soldiers," and then didn't have any sort of threat or anything to back it up, they'd be like, "What's in it for me? I'm kind of going to do my own thing then." But when that statement, that demand, that command is backed up by, in that clip, it was just one dragon, but she's 3 dragons who breathe fire, and they've seen these dragons hurt people. That becomes a lot more credible, and it becomes a lot more easier to be like, well, maybe I don't agree with my principal, but he is a dragon, she is a dragon, so I'm going to do exactly as she says. And if you think of in feudal Europe, medieval Europe, typically these things were associated with the religion and in the Catholic Church. You sort of have legitimacy through institutions that the public deem worthy. So the Catholic Church in that time, in this case, the institution would be a giant dragon.
Yeah. Really interesting way to overcome it. She's got the power of the dragon to kind of overcome the principal agent problem. Real life examples. So, the traditional ones you often think about within economics are employers and employees, not as much ruling. A classic example I might share in a class. Somebody's hired to work at the front of a fast food restaurant. They're in charge mainly. Customers come in and, take their orders, you serve them, treat them well, and they go on. But there are times where, okay, it might be busy, but then there might be times where it's slowed down just a little bit. And what do you do then? Well, the worker might want to relax for a moment, maybe chit chat with their colleagues. Is that what the owner wants? Probably not. Saying, oh, okay, you've got a couple minutes. Hey, grab a towel and go wipe down the tables, and make sure everything seems cleaned up around here. And, check the napkin, or the napkins fully stocked. All of the various things to help make the restaurant run more efficiently. When there's a customer there, it's probably the person doesn't need as much supervision, right? Things are going to get to the manager immediately if they're not dealing with that. Less supervision is needed. But in the times when it slows down a little bit, I think you are more likely in, say, a restaurant, fast food restaurant, to run into a bit of the principal agent problem.
Yep. And I think like with there's sort of an undercurrent within the market of businesses are becoming anti-remote work in some sense, and obviously workers like remote work, or at least many of them do.
Yeah.
But the principal agent problem, you can't oversee your workers when they're remote at home. You can only do so much with technology and seeing what their mouse is doing at a certain time or whatever. So it's interesting that even in the labor market, you can see this principal agent problem coming up. And if you're looking for a job or an internship, and a lot of people are looking for remote work, you're
Correct.
sort of within a principal agent problem there. You're arguing with your boss right now.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you to everybody for tuning in. This is part of a series, so tune in every week, subscribe and like, and click the notifications bell. You'll get an alert when the next video comes up, as they will be dropping throughout this series, the season 2 of House of the Dragon.